Hey everyone, MeltingMan234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Recently I've been going through some old PC games that I still have. Most of them I got rid of years ago, but I guess I decided to hang on to a couple of them, like Toy Story's Animated Storybook, one of my personal favorites out of the Disney Animated Storybook games that I played. Topsy Turvy, man, I had a lot of fun with that one. Anastasia, Puka and Bartok's Adventure. Man, this is really old. Maybe I'll cover this on Forgotten Media one day. Then there's Disney's Villain's Revenge, a game that I actually got much later, during my teen years I think, but it was still nice. And of course I already covered this game on Forgotten Media years ago. Anyway, looking through these old games, I'm surprised that I still had this one, Pac Man, Adventures in Time. This was another game that I enjoyed back in the day, and surprisingly it never got ported to any newer consoles or any new PC platforms like Steam. And despite being over 20 years old, I somehow got to work on my Windows 10. Same thing with that Villain's Revenge game. Well, considering the fact that the yellow guy has had some new games recently, I figured now is a good time to cover Pac Man Adventures in Time. And before you ask, no, it's not a sequel to Pac in Time. So the story in this game is that the ghosts have stolen a magical power pellet known as the Artifact. They take it to their leader, known as the Mollusk, who then proceeds to smash the artifact into pieces and scatter them in the past. With the help of Professor Pac, Pac-Man begins his time-traveling journey to find and restore the artifact and make it safely back to the present time. So yeah, pretty basic story. I did like the villain Mollusk, despite not seeing much of him. He's kept in the shadows, and all we see is just his head and hand. Maybe he's just that, or maybe there's more to this guy. Either way, he's just another one of those one-shot villains to be thrown onto the pile. That was kind of the thing with some Pac Man games. Whenever there was a game that had story, they always had these random one-shot villains and rarely any recurring villains in the games. Anyway, with a simple story comes with simple gameplay. Basically, it's traditional Pac Man. You run around in a maze eating Pac pellets, avoiding the ghosts, using power pellets to eat the ghosts to earn points, and trying to eat all the dots in order to move on to the next level. Kind of interesting that around this time, Pac Man had already stepped into the third dimension with the original Pac Man world in 1999. So the next year, they went back to basics with this game. You'll be thrown back and forth between 45 different levels, taking place in different time periods, like the prehistoric era, ancient Egypt, medieval times, the Wild West, and finally the future for the last couple of levels. As you'd expect, you control Pac Man on where to go, but you also get a jump ability. Something that was first utilized in Pac-Mania, but in this game, the jump ability has a cooldown meter, so you have to be more careful on when to use it. I find it odd how for the keyboard you move Pac-Man with the arrow buttons, and that's fun, but then the jump button is on the control button. I don't know, for some reason I never really got used to it back then. Fortunately, I tried this game out on my Xbox controller, and it works pretty good. Plus, you also get the fruit that you can collect to earn points, especially when trying to get extra lives. There's the classics like cherries, strawberries, and watermelons, but they also feature some other food types like biscuits, corn, and candy canes, and for some reason there's also non-edible items like four-leaf clovers, and crowns, and rubber ducks? Each level always provides some type of gimmick that Pac-Man has to deal with. The most common types you'll be dealing with are slopes, which causes you to slow down when going up, or causes you to go fast when going down. And then there's extra platforms connecting to bridges and elevators, making the mazes feel more 3D. And that's very unique. As far as I know, this is the only official Pac Man game that actually uses this concept. If you stay in the maze for too long, then one of the ghosts gets replaced by the classic Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde ghost. I think those are more faster and aggressive than the others, but I'm not sure. Now that I think about it, it seems to imply that all these ghosts are ancestors if they get replaced by the current ones. And Pac-Man goes around eating them all. Well, I guess it's a good thing that these mazes have respawn areas, otherwise Pac-Man's just screwing up the timeline and killing off ancestors. Yeesh. Speaking of which, the outfits for the ghosts in the different time periods are cool. The designers really went all out with the costumes for specific mazes. But yeah, outside of the slopes and platforms, there's a lot of other things that happen, like certain hazards that either stun you or can instantly kill you, and a lot of level gimmicks. Like one level you have to survive without any power pellets, one level you're swimming underwater and have to eat Pac dots in order to keep your oxygen level up, one level you have to eat Pac dots on one side of the maze to open a new pathway, and sometimes you'd be in the spherical or cylinder type maze. Yeah, this was way before Mario Galaxy was a thing, but I still think it's cool. One of my favorite levels is in the Wild West, where you're on this moving train and you have to eat all the Pac dots within the time limit in order to continue on before the coaches break away. There's also some mini games that happen in between certain levels, whether it's a shooting gallery or a race to the finish, and they're okay. And despite only having 3 lives, there are certain levels that let you save your progress, or just type in a cheat code to get more extra lives. If only my younger self knew about it back then. Yeah, that's another thing, there's quite a handful of cheat codes in this game. There's the standard stuff like extra lives or invincibility, and there's also codes that can make Pac Man big or small, although for some reason they act very glitchy on my end. I guess that's one downside of trying to run this game on a more modern PC. There's also a cheat code for a first-person mode, where not only can you barely see anything, but the controls are all screwed up as well. Yeah, I never really figured out how that works. And finally, there's some bonus content like extra mazes and some bonus videos. Honestly, the videos aren't really that great. Half of them are just cutouts of the characters running around, and the other half are outtakes, but they're not as funny as the outtakes from the original Pac Man world. Although the extra mazes are pretty cool, like the medieval one, where there's a ground level, rainbow bridges, and an underwater area. And there's one bonus maze that's modeled off of the classic arcade game. So basically, the extra mazes are the only things that are worth unlocking in this game. Or just do what I did and just type in a cheat code that unlocks everything. Oh yeah, I guess I should briefly mention the multiplayer. There's at least 3 different types of modes. There's Dot Mania, where you have to gather the most Pac dots as possible, Time Bomb, which is basically a game of hot potato, and Ghost Tag, where some of the players start off as ghosts, and if they touch you, then you become a ghost and they become a Pac person to collect Pac dots. Funny enough, you can actually glitch this mode to turn everyone into Pac people, and then it just becomes a game of Dot Mania. So yeah, the minigames for the multiplayer stuff is just okay. There's also online multiplayer, which I really find that hard to believe. I mean, sure, online multiplayer is a very common thing in video games nowadays, but back in the 2000s, not so much. So in closing, Pac Man Adventures in Time is a fun classic-style Pac Man game with a lot of unique gimmicks, and I'd even go as far to say that it's an underrated gem. It's a shame that this game never got ported to newer consoles or anything, and it seems to have fallen into that abandonware category, since the developers for this game have gone out of business years ago. Yeah, this game was made by different developers, and not Namco itself. They did get their approval to make the game, but that's it. I'm sure there exist emulators for it somewhere, but for getting your hands on a legit copy of the game, the prices have varied on eBay and Amazon. Sometimes they're cheap and other times they're expensive. But if you're a Pac Man fan and have some interest in playing it, I'd say it's worth checking out. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.